This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 19th of February 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm Tuam.
And I am CS.
In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, 13 new national tests to replace KCPE and KCSE. In the Standard, what's Raila up to? And in the Star, Uhuru did not invite me to State House, RUTO. So I think considering that there was a meeting yesterday at State House that RUTO was not a part of, I think that's topical. Let's begin there.
Absolutely. Uhuru did not invite me to State House. That is RUTO, that's what he said, apparently. Now, I want to say this. If RUTO can miss a cabinet meeting when he is deputy president, what will he do when he is president? If he can rebel against his boss in public, what will he do when he's president? If he can tell us, or if he can tell his boss that he will not resign until the president finishes his term, what will he do when he is president?
Wow.
If the Constitution designates the deputy president as the president's principal assistant, what business does RUTO have telling his boss that the Big Four should have more priority than BBI? What is the work of an assistant? Anyway, he doesn't set the agenda. His work is to do what he is told to do. And if he doesn't like it, he should resign.
Oh, wow.
Today, we will be brutal. As an assistant, RUTO is incompetent. In fact, William Ruto does not deserve to rule this country.
Wow.
Reason being, if he can behave like this as an assistant, what will he do as president? And to you, Gema, this man who loves you very much can treat you a king with such contempt. What will he do to you when you put him up there?
Oh my goodness.
Use your heads, Gema. Use your damn heads.
Oh wow, okay, scathing words today too.
Words.
But I think, okay, as much as it's harsh, I think you make a very good point. As much as, you know, when people say, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are, it's the same. If you show me a track record of how you operate in your work, it gives me an indication of how you behave when, you know, you get a promotion or you move forward.
Absolutely.
So I think he's only showing us how he's going to behave if indeed he were ever to become president.
Yes.
So, yeah, interesting story.
Absolutely.
I would like to remind you that we have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. We ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And the last one?
Is it
thoughtful or just plain lazy? Exactly. CS, keep up. I think
I'm the one who did it.
No, I'm telling CS to wake up. I didn't hear his voice.
Oh, right.
All right. And so with that, I think that we can put the the Star in the parking bay. Yes?
Yes.
And I think we can move on to the Standard. What's Raila up to? The Standard asks a very interesting question, but I think we already know the answer. The Standard is telling us that there are details of a plan to procure 4 helicopters from France, which are supposedly on the way, and a PA system from the US. And they say that Raila is doing this in an effort to ramp up his political ambitions in the next 18 months. But they also tell us that he had a meeting with 2 presidential aspirants this week. One, Mukisa Kitui, who just quit his job. Am I not right? Yeah?
Yes.
And then Makueni Governor Kivuda Kibwana.
Yes.
And I think we'll put the Kitui story to the side and focus on Kibwana.
Yes.
Only because I think it seems he has shifted sides.
Absolutely.
And it's getting quite dizzying these days to see people on Friday, you know, screaming, I'm against BBI, and then on Monday,
they are saying,
they're at the knees, at the feet of the president.
Absolutely.
But I think all this proves is that people don't really know what's going on, right? I think they need a bit of direction, and the only direction is BBI.
It's BBI.
Stop pretending.
Absolutely.
I think we're also doing a good job at the Fifth Estate sensitizing people about BBI. So
tell us about it. Tell us about it.
What a shameless plug. I really do like this Standard headline, but what I was saying is, I think we know what Raila is up to. Why is this headline pretending, right?
Yes.
I think we will also put that in the parking bay.
Absolutely.
While we let Chaka tell us about the Daily Nation.
Yeah, today I'm steering clear of politics. Well, not entirely. Daily Nation is informing us that of 13 new national tests that are going to replace KCPE and KCSE. The context here is a transition from 844 to the competency-based curriculum. A lot of people have been wondering, and especially parents, is what is CBC and why are we moving to this new model? There's a lot that can be said, but I'd like to highlight one or two key things. Firstly, post-independence, a huge focus of the education system was to train people to fill vacancies in government. Fast forward, a commission was established in 1976, the Gashati Commission, which made an effort to anticipate and address the question of unemployment. And a key recommendation was increased vocational education. Right. Unfortunately, the commission finished its work right around the time of the transition from the fast Kenyatta regime to the Moi regime, so the report largely wasn't implemented. Fast forward, 1981, President Moi forms a commission, the Mackay Commission, and the focus was the establishment of a second university, Moi University. That was the focus. But the commission gave itself the extra job of reviewing the curriculum, and it recommended the scrapping of A-levels under the 763 system and introducing 844. The reasons had nothing to do with the education system or curriculum itself, but there's a lot of politics there, which we can maybe explore on another day. Now, after 1985, you had reviews in 90, 92, and 95, and the sum effect of all the reviews is that they kept reducing subjects, and the biggest victim was vocational training. So by 95, what you have is a very narrow, small curriculum under the 844, which was very rigid. In the final analysis, what has been the effect of all this? Only about 20% of children excel in this system and proceed to university. 80% of children exit poorly and inadequately trained. Here's a reality check. You cannot have sustainable development if you're not involving the participation of all citizens.
Yes.
And the second, even bigger problem is that A44 sells a dream to every child that if you do not go to university, you are a failure. By the time you have children in high school and even in primary committing suicide because they feel they're failures, that is a serious problem. It means the system has been communicating a very wrong and dangerous message to our children. And because of this belief in university as the only gateway, a lot of students are not even interested in the existing TVETs that do offer vocational training at post-secondary level. This would be a different story if they were acquainted with certain vocational skills from very early on, and we focused on uplifting more of our children. Let me conclude by saying this. What the competency-based curriculum, which has been designed by brilliant people like Dr. David Njengere and his team, who are advisors to cabinet in the CS Magoha of Education. What Dr. David Njengere and his team have done is that they've designed a system that aligns our education system with the global sustainable development goals. And SDG 4 requires that education should see quality, equity, and inclusion, not 80% of our children falling to the wayside. CBC is based on a no child left behind philosophy. It focuses on a child's potential, not profiling them based on 2 exams that they sit in their lifetimes, the name of KCPE and KCSE. Instead, CBC seeks to equip children with transferable skills whereby they can focus. The focus isn't simply acquiring knowledge, but rather application of knowledge. CBC therefore creates an environment where there's a broad curriculum for a child to discover themselves and to thereafter delve into specialization. It celebrates potential and also expand the scope of industrialization by creating and advancing more industries.
Wow.
You know, CS Magoha should hire you.
For some PR, right? I feel like if the Ministry of Education were able to articulate the justifications of CBC in the way that you have, CS, I think that more people would be on board with it. So Magoha, can you find a notebook and take some notes, right? All right, so on that note, I think we need to decide what our winning headline is. So
it's a star.
All right. Okay. I'm going to toss the Daily Nation, sadly, despite how interesting that was, just because it's boring, right? And I'm going to go with the Standard. What's Raila up to?
Leave Raila alone. Let's
all right. You're the tiebreaker.
I'm awake, so I'm going with the Star.
Excellent.
I'm never playing this roller coaster again, honestly. There is no respect on this table. All right, fine. We toss the Standard, and our winning headline goes to the Star. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons, and also we have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, are the cartoons humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective or just plain lazy? Wow, guys, 2 years on this table and we're not learning. Okay, I say
leave us alone. Let's go straight to Daily Nation.
Daily Nation.
Ndula, it's a caricature of Gideon Moi, Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, Musalia Mudavadi, trying to fit into some oversized pants who I believe belong to the late Daniel Arap Moi. And the caption there is Kano keeps regrouping. And I think Ndula is right.
Yeah, they're just telling us big shoes to fill, and nobody's figured out how to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is so sad. I feel like Gideon has such an opportunity, not only based on legacy and history, but you know where he comes from, and he's failing quite a bit.
Absolutely. I think that one we put in the parking bay.
Definitely. And the standard.
The standard, you have Gado, and who is this who has won? Jubilee jeans. And the back pocket is Raila Odinga, caricature Raila Odinga, and he's saying, see, BBI is all inclusive. And then there's a bag there. I don't know who's carrying that bag. And on the bag, I don't know, I think Musele would have a dick. And that's Mr. Chameleon himself. You want to say what's his name is? Is that Kalonzo Musyoka? It's a caricature of Kalonzo Musyoka.
And I think the person in the jeans, it's Uhuru Kenyatta. Isn't that a Rivertex shirt?
Oh, that's a Rivertex shirt, right? And then Jubilee, and then the Lee. Very clever.
Gosh, why is he behaving like Ndula?
It's excellent, excellent. I'm also wearing Lee jeans, and then the people are down there. Not a bad
Great cartoon. Okay, finally, in the Star.
You have Ozone. That is a drawing of, what do you call this thing? Is it a wrecking ball or a nuclear bomb? It's a nuclear bomb in Parliament. And that on that nuclear bomb is the caricature of William Ruto. He's in it. And the caption there is, giving hustler talk larger than life status. This is a great cartoon.
It's a great cartoon. Yeah, I think he's telling us that this hustler dynasty's narrative, it's overrated.
It's overrated, absolutely. And that's exactly what
And I think the fact that he's showing it as a bomb is reflecting how deadly and dangerous it can become.
It could be, yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
maybe we should give Ozone the winning
I think definitely. I like it because it's subtle, right?
Excellent.
All right, so we toss the Daily Nation, we toss the Standard, and we give the winning cartoon today to Ozone of the Star.
Yes.
And now for our final thought. But before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit like.
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney.
The theme for this week's books, as we reflect on what we've read this week, were inspired by Black History Month. On Tuesday, we started off with a polemic tome titled The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Ambitious in its scope, it covers great issues of race between 4500 BC to 2000 AD. The book was a result of 16 years of research, and its primary aim is to articulate a reinterpretation of the history of the African peoples. On Wednesday, we discussed Why I'm No Longer Talking About Race to White People by Rennie Edo-Lodge. The book adventures into an analysis of structural racism, the eradication of Black history, the political purpose of white dominance, and the inextricable link between class and race. Thursday, we delved into The Sword and the Shield by Peniel Joseph, which juxtaposes the lives and legacies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and how they pushed and inspired one another.
Yes, and we round out this week with asking the question, how did Europe underdevelop Africa? And this book was written in 1972, so almost 48 years ago. And I still think that even with all that time, the book is probably more relevant now than ever. And so this book describes how Africa was deliberately exploited and underdeveloped by European colonial regimes. So it essentially presents an economic analysis of how Europe engaged in an unequal relationship with Africa and subsequently exploited the continent. And this specifically how this form of colonialism really differed from other parts of the world. So he suggests that Europe and Africa had a relationship whereby Europe's development was dependent upon the underdevelopment of Africa.
Yes.
He argues that there's an intimate and causal relationship between Europe's crazy industrialization and its growth and Africa's decline and at best stagnation. Therefore, Europe's capitalistic growth can only be correctly and fully understood within the lens and context of Africa's exploitation and colonial experience.
Right.
So of course in Africa, we know we have this apparent paradox whereby we are the richest continent on this planet in natural resources. But we're also the poorest And of course, we can't lose any of that irony. So Africa is at the very center of global economic interest. Everybody wants a piece of Africa. But we still have these major countries who are still scrambling for our resources. They just want to get a piece of us immediately. So not only does this book investigate the colonial exploitation of Africa, but it brings in the pre-colonial and pre-European slave trade Africa to life. He really goes back into history. I think he starts looking at Africa from the 15th century. And he puts together this criticism of Europe's interaction with us, both through trade, slave trade, and trade in goods. But what happened is Europe essentially killed Africa's trade system, our inter-trade system. And they forced African civilizations to not only trade, but to trade only and exclusively with European and Western countries. So this also changed our internal economies and made us trade with what suited them. So we started trading, in human beings, in cotton, in minerals, things that we had, yes, but we didn't necessarily trade within each other. And he concludes that Europe did not only enrich their own empires, but they ended up then reversing the economic systems and structures that we had developed, for decades before. So the first section of this book actually takes a look at the people of Africa before the horror of the slave trade and many of the consequences thereafter. So he says that at the dawn of the transatlantic slave trade, there was actually a level of similarity between Europe and Africa, which I think is so incredible. He says that when the Dutch first visited Benin City, they were struck by its resemblance to their own cities. And he says one traveler described it like this: "The town seems to be very great. The king's palace is a collection of buildings which occupy as much space as the town of Haarlem. There are numerous apartments for the prince's ministers and fine galleries, most of which are as big as those that we see as the exchange in Amsterdam." How depressing is that? That at that time when they arrived, we were just as good, if not better than them. And they completely reversed them and did all of those beautiful things that we had worked so hard for. I guess the question is, what happens next?
Absolutely. Now, the chapter that I loved is how Europe became the dominant section of a worldwide trade. Now, I like what he says. He says, Africa helped develop Western Europe in the same proportion as Western Europe helped to underdevelop Africa. Now, the first significant thing about the internalization of trade in the 15th century was that Europeans took the initiative and went to other parts of the world. No Chinese boats reached Europe, and if any African canoes reached the Americas, they did not establish two-way links. Can you imagine? He even calls our vessels canoes. Now, anyway, what was called international trade was nothing but the extension of overseas of European interests. Western Europe owned and directed the great majority of the world's seagoing vessels, and they controlled the financing of trade between four continents. Between four continents. Africa had little clue as to the tricontinental links between Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Europe had a monopoly of knowledge about the international exchange system. Seen as a whole, for Western Europe was the only sector capable of viewing the system as a whole. I mean, look, by the time the Imperial British East African Company built a railway from Mombasa to Jinja in Uganda, and the Africans called it a long snake, who really had the advantage? If they did not compensate anyone when the building of the railway, if they did not compensate anyone when they built the railway, not the Giriama, not the Michikenda, not the Kamba, not Kikuyu, who had the advantage then? If Kenya was sold to the British government by that Mzungu company for 250,000 sterling pounds, who had the advantage? The truth is this: yes, we were robbed, no doubt, and we were robbed big time. But the Africans' lack of libido dominandi was the beginning of our problems. The curse of possessing plenty is what we felt we were too comfortable, and is also when we felt we were too comfortable. And yet our existence wasn't predicated on what was within our borders. Our existence was informed by the gluttony of those outside our borders. And we did not realize that. We did not realize that our resources were used against us. And sadly, that's still going on. I mean, just think of the DRC today. Underneath the DRC soils is $24 trillion worth of wealth. That is $4 trillion more than the US economy. But look at their poverty levels.
But also look at the state of the country itself. I think the West is happy for it to be an unstable place so that they can extract as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And my point is very simple here. I think the African problem is our lack of going to conquer other lands. If we had that, that mentality, I don't think the African would be at the bottom of the racial totem pole.
All right.
It's as simple as that.
Now, I'd like to take just one step back. Yesterday, we spoke about and focused on a few Black and African giants. Malcolm X, Pio Gama Pinto, Tom Mboya, and Martin Luther. Today, we are examining the scriptures as articulated by Walter Rodney. What do all these men have in common? All these were Black messiahs. And because they had the unenviable burden of being conveyors of truth, they were martyred, assassinated.
Yes.
Yesterday I mentioned how history is a colorful tapestry, but that also life can be dizzyingly poetic. I mentioned how Pio Gama Pinto is credited with influencing Malcolm X's thinking from Black nationalism to Pan-Africanism. That is the colorful tapestry of history.
Yeah.
The dizzying fact was that they were killed 3 days apart, even though on 2 different continents.
Right.
Today, I'd like to share with you some more dizzying and tragic poetry. When Malcolm X was assassinated, he was 39. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was 39. When Pio Gama Pinto was assassinated, he was 38. Tom Mboya, 38.
Wow.
Thomas Sankara, 37. Patrice Lumumba, 35. Steve Biko, 30.
Oh boy.
Walter Rodney, 38.
Wow.
And if you know what age Jesus was when he died, maybe you can forgive me when I refer to them as Black messiahs. What was that Jay-Z lyric inspired by Jean-Michel Basquiat? Most young kings get their head cut off. And these Black messiahs, these custodians of precious truths, had their heads cut off by people Walter Rodney wrote about in this Bible, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Them and their cousins, because he also highlights that Europeans were joined by and in some respects replaced by capitalists in the United States. Walter Rodney shone a blinding light on the purveyors of darkness who were underdeveloping Africa. And what did he mean by underdevelopment? Exploitation. Walter Rodney taught us that all the countries underdeveloped in the world are exploited by others. And the underdevelopment in this case is a product of capitalist, imperialist, and colonialist exploitation. African and Asian societies were developing independently until they were taken over directly or indirectly by capitalist powers. The effect, exploitation followed, and Africa was deprived of her natural resources and labor. Secondly, restrictions were placed on Africa's capacity to make the maximum use of its economic potential, without which you cannot have development. And so what you're left with is a situation where the way in which Africa has for a long time been integrated into the developed capitalist economies is an integration which has been unfavorable to Africa. It has been designed to ensure Africa is dependent on the big capitalist countries, what Walter Rodney calls structural dependence. And dependent nations can never be developed.
Yes.
Now, our teacher is careful to make a distinction here. You can be interdependent as a country, but still economically independent.
Yes.
Structural dependence, however, negates this possibility for Africa. Let me conclude by saying this. One thing that Walter Rodney makes abundantly clear is this. Whatever the cause of Africa's underdevelopment, the ultimate responsibility for development of Africa is on the shoulder of Africans.
Yes.
Every African has a responsibility to understand the system and to work for its overthrow.
Excellent. I see true? We agree.
Synergy.
We agree.
Yeah.
I'd like to finish with a lyric by Damian Marley and Nas from the album Distant Relatives.
I love it.
Africa must wake up, sleeping sons of Jacob. Yesterday we were kings. Can you tell the young ones, who are we today?
Lovely. So, on a day when we had a winning headline from the Star and a winning cartoon also from the Star, I believe that CS has given us our parting word for the weekend. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also find us on Pang, Free to Air, Star Times, and Go TV. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.